People around the globe are responding to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's plea for foreign fighters. That includes the Americans you see here. They say they felt called to stand up for Ukraine. Zelensky called for the formation of an international defense legion back in February. It's unclear exactly how many volunteers have left their home countries for Ukraine, but in early March, a Ukrainian general said 20,000 foreigners have expressed their commitment to join the fight against Russia. Former CIA operative and author Lindsay Moran is with me now. Lindsay, thanks for being here. So tell us, where are the majority of these foreign fighters coming from, and what's motivating them?
It's interesting. The majority are actually coming from the region around Ukraine. Some of them are coming from former Soviet republics. Many are coming from areas in Europe and Eastern Europe, but there are also significant numbers coming from the United States and Canada, which is something that we haven't really seen before in modern global warfare, at least this kind of movement before. Obviously, foreign fighters fighting wars has been going on since the beginning of war. But this is kind of the first time that we've seen, say, Americans and Canadians, ordinary Americans and ordinary Westerners feeling drawn to go and help defend Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And I think there are some different factors driving that. But I would say largely it's a sense of ideology. Never before, at least in my time, have we seen such a clear delineation of good versus evil. And I think that is drawing not only veterans, but ordinary people to want to get involved, to want to defend Ukraine, and also the sense that this fight is not going to stay in Ukraine, that if we let Ukraine fall, this is going to spill out to the rest of the Western world.
Lindsay, you made an important point there, that you're hearing that both veterans and non-military trained personnel are seeing this as an ideological battle that's motivating them. Are there dangers with people who don't have combat experience or don't have military training signing up to become fighters in this war?
Absolutely. There are dangers. There are dangers and risks to the people themselves, but there's also a danger to the overall fight. Let's go back to veterans. I think a lot of veterans are being drawn to the cause, and there's a reason for that. Veterans are generally driven by a sense of mission. And so we have a whole generation of veterans, perhaps who fought in the war in Afghanistan, who saw all of their efforts come to naught with the debacle of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Many of them, I think, suffered terrible PTSD and guilt over leaving Afghani partners behind and having accomplished nothing in a 20-year war. You also have veterans, U.S. veterans of the Iraq War, where there was a muddled mission. Our mission was not quite clear. Whereas the U.S. military went in at first and was greeted as heroes when they toppled Saddam Hussein, it turned into a big mess. So here we have a situation where there are many highly trained and experienced veterans seeing, as I said, a clear delineation between good and evil and wanting to join the cause and wanting to bring their expertise, both with weaponry and fighting, but also with medical care, urban warfare, anything that they can provide to be part of the fight. And that's all probably or potentially for the good. Now, when you have ordinary ideologues, people like you or me, who are just exasperated with what's going on, and we want to do anything in our power to help the people in Ukraine, I'm not so sure that going over to fight is the best option. Not only is it a risk to yourself, but if you go over without any training, you potentially could contribute to the chaos. There have been studies and indications that show that foreign fighters joining a war, it prolongs the war and often results in an uptick in civilian deaths. So that's something to consider. And I can, while I totally empathize with the call to arms and having that sense of desperation and wanting to do something, I personally feel like those people who want to go over and volunteer should be not only veterans, but those with real combat experience who can help the Ukrainians and not add to the chaos.
You know, as you're talking about the chaos, I'm thinking that there's also language barriers potentially, because a lot of these people that we're talking about, as you say, they're motivated by a sense of purpose, but not necessarily that they have any tie to Ukraine. They're not Ukrainian nationals, or they don't even have Ukrainian lineage. They just see this as a fight of democracy and the principles of the West versus something that seems antithetical to that. So when we're looking at people who are potentially trained, if they have military experience, or untrained, but have this language barrier, is there a process that foreigners need to go through before they can actually assist Ukraine?
Well, Ukraine is trying to have a process. And in fact, you know, if you are a veteran or you are someone who wants to join the International Legion or the Ukrainian Legion, you know, you're supposed to go to the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C. and go through those steps and a certain amount of vetting. You know, the Ukrainian government and military, they know that they want seasoned U.S. veterans or seasoned Western veterans. They don't want every Yahoo and his brother. But all that said, given the desperation, given the fact that ordinary Ukrainian civilians are fighting, Ukraine is in a position where they want to take all the help that they can get. And I did want to mention that in addition to veterans and ideologues, there is another more dangerous group that is often attracted to foreign wars, and that's extremists. And I should add that it's not just foreign fighters and Western fighters who are joining the Ukrainian side. Vladimir Putin has put out a call for foreign fighters to join the Russian side. He's asked very seasoned military operatives who fought in Syria on behalf of Russia or who were aligned with Russia in Syria. He wants those people to come. He knows that they are better at urban warfare than his Russian conscripts. The Russian military is performing disastrously. So Vladimir Putin is appealing to a variety of extremists and mercenaries to come fight on behalf of Russia. So it's a very dangerous game all around.
Fascinating, every slice of it. Lindsay Moran, thank you.